Can't wait to tell the Pope that one day. You think we can get the Pope on the show?
No. That's my guess. I'm saying we could ask.
He wears those jackets now and all that.
We could ask His Holiness. I have a feeling the
AI
answer would still be no. But
he likes the gays. Hey, we have a show today.
Also like everyone. He's the Pope.
We have Alexandra Jamieson. We have Bob Gower. We're talking about radical alignment, which I almost always say the wrong name of the book, but radical alignment. So there we go. We're going to learn how to go all in. We're going to talk about things. There's going to be stuff. There'll be frolic.
If you want to have...
Hi, everyone. Tim Kitzer from NBA Jam and NFL Blitz, welcoming you to The Backpack Show. Your hosts, Chris Brogan, Kerry Gorgone, Boom Shakalaka.
Backpack Show.
If you want to have more fulfilled team members.
I haven't done that in a while. If you want to have what?
You do it all the damn time, just not on the
show. You're making that up. I let you make your points, don't I?
Eventually.
Oh, for gosh sake, stop talking. Let the woman speak.
All right.
But that's okay. I don't have as many stories about like 1970s places I've been, shawarma. Good morning, Annette.
Hi, Annette. Hi, Chloe. I think I saw
Scotland.
At least both of my parents.
See your dad, your mom, Leslie.
Oh,
running low on vanilla.
Vanilla. Oh, that's right. You make cookies with it.
I do.
Let's grab Alex and Bob. We have so many questions. We are going to get all tuned in on how to be aligned radically. All right, give up the goods. You had to write this book because why? What was forcing you to have to do this sort of shenanigans?
Because the conversations I wasn't having was destroying my life. Does that cover it?
Yeah, that's good.
Okay,
next
thanks
question.
for coming to the show, everybody.
Yeah, we had this method that we had developed, and then we kept using it and kept teaching it to people. And one of the people we taught it to actually wrote the intro to the book and now runs a publishing company, though she didn't publish this book. But she just kept she kept badgering us. She told us that it saved her marriage, and then she just kept badgering us to actually write a book about it. So we finally did.
And then you were like, "Cool, we did. Will you publish it?" And she was like, "No."
Well, in her fairness to her, she didn't have the publishing company at the time.
She was not yet a publisher.
Not yet a publisher. Now she's got a couple on the New York Times bestseller, actually. So now, yeah. It's this tiny little. It's one of those instances of there's this thing that you use all the time, and it takes a dozen people telling you, that little thing that you shared with us. What was that again? Like, oh, can you? Like, so many people were asking for it after we shared it with them that we're like, oh, this is a thing. This is a thing that needs to be out there. Yeah. And it's a really simple way to have tough conversations it's kind, it's clear, and it takes a lot of the anxiety out of rough topics for me.
Well, so we're going to dig into that. Hi, Carol, as well. Wow, everybody's all here. We got the gang. All right. So what came first? Did the all-in method... did you hang everything off of that basically? Like you wrote a book around the all-in method, or how does that work?
Yeah, that was really it. I think the premise behind the all-in method, or we sometimes just call it ICBD because it's the 4 buckets that you talk about. But the idea is that it's the things that we often don't say to each other where the relationship ruptures happen rather than the things we do say to each other, right? So, and the idea is that they're just like these 4 areas where if you have the context, if you understand that that's what's going on for the person, or if you understand that that's what the person is bringing to the conversation, that conversations tend to go a lot better. So, we use it personally. We use it when we go visit my family, which is a whole thing. Or we use it, I used it yesterday. I'm in the process of building a new team at Changeforce, and we're, so we bring people together, and the idea is that when we know each other, we do better work together, and when we have some degree of personal relationship. I also don't like to force, to things too much. I don't like things to be too, how to put, I think sometimes these methodologies can be a little too prescriptive or too, I don't know. Yeah, they just kind of like force the issue in a way. And I like relationships to develop organically and naturally. So, and this methodology kind of lends itself to that.
Do you find there are some minefields in getting to know one another personally? My mom taught me to just ask everybody questions, and if they don't want to answer them, they just won't. That's probably why I'm here. But there's a lot that's a lot of divisive things happening in the country right now. For example, a lot of things going on that people are happy to talk about at length, but that might cause strife in the workplace. So what do you do when getting to know one another kind of takes you through a minefield like that?
So the way this is set up, there's a few kind of ground rules that when we figured out what they were, I was like, oh man, I wish I could go. I don't often wish I could live my life over, but I'm like, I wish I could go back in time and tell myself, this is possible. Like, you can have a conversation where you're just sharing information. You're not trying to change somebody else's opinion necessarily. Everybody's kind of addressing the same topic from a different angle in the same way. No one person's dominating the whole thing. It's not like you're going to win and I'm going to lose. This is a conversation. And that was kind of revelatory to me. It's like, somebody has to win.
Yeah.
And if it's not me, well, I feel really bad if I try to win. You know, I got all hung up around these anxieties of how to relate.
Yeah. And the questions are very much about like, how do you feel, or how are you oriented towards this thing that we're doing together? Right. So in the case of building a team, it's like, so again, I'll just do the 4 buckets really quickly. It's intentions, concerns, boundaries, and dreams. So it's like, why are you here? What are you worried about being here? What are the boundaries? What are the things that you need in order to be here well? And what's your best case scenario? What do you dream about? If this thing goes really well, what do you dream about? So we're not asking like, what do you think about abortion? Right? You know, like,
Yeah.
you know, we're not bringing up like topics that can be potentially divisive or potentially, you know, and we do, as Alex said, you set it up. So if you are listening, you are purely in receiving mode, right? You can ask a question, but the question needs to be curious for more detail from the other person, not like, don't you think that's a stupid position to be taking? You know, like, it's not like we don't like have reactions. We're not allowed to react to what the person says, because we're trying to create a place where the person, you know, where the person who's speaking feels open. And then the other thing, especially in a work context, that we always say is, look, not all of us, you know, like, power is such a strange thing, right? It's a subtle thing sometimes, and also, you know, if I'm new to a group, I may not want to like share everything that's on my mind. I might want, you know, like, so we encourage people to modulate what they share, right? Like, use your best judgment. Don't share something you don't feel personally comfortable sharing, right? And so
You can think a thing and not say it, Bob? Is that what you're talking?
Yeah, potentially. I can't, but you know, other people, I hear other people can.
It's a thing we've heard of. I think that some of the interesting details that I've pulled from it all, one of them was, I mean, for me, I think it's hard to even imagine the set the stage part for some people. I think that what you're saying sounds a little Pollyanna-ish. Like, I think there's a set of humans who would be like, oh, sure, that works great if you're with a bunch of cool hippies, but I work in an engineering plant or whatever. How do you get to setting the stage? Like, to me, I think, for instance, in other methodologies and stuff like that, like trying to provide feedback, for instance, you always have to approach with that, hey, are you open to some feedback right now? What's the set the stage part of getting to this conversation?
Well, I have two different ways to say. One is, it's as simple as like setting a meeting with someone about a topic, right? If you like invite somebody to a meeting in whatever platform, like, hey, Bob, let's have a meeting about budget on Friday. Like, that's setting the stage. And in a personal context, right, the last thing anybody wants to hear is, we need to talk, like as soon as you walk through the door at the end of your day. Instead, you can set the stage by saying, like, after dinner, hey, I'd love to talk about budget, our family budget, on Sunday. Like, that's setting the stage, giving someone a heads up that in the future we'll be doing something, not like springing a trap on them.
Yeah. And I would say there's always the so what kind of piece of it too, right? You know, like, hey, I want to talk to you about this topic so we can be on the same page, so we can do better together. Right? So in a work context, it's always, especially if I'm like the boss, which I frequently am these days, right? Like, I'm like, I do want to talk about this stuff so I can support you in doing the best work of your life. And so we can kind of work well together and be a good team. And then also, I often will set the stage by going first, so the way not to do it, I'll give you an example of way not to do it. I once worked with, speaking of engineering, I worked with an engineering manager at a relatively large company. And I convinced him that vulnerability was a valuable thing. Vulnerability and empathy were powerful things to have on your team. And he thought that was great. And then he put a sign behind him in his office. So if you were meeting with him in his office, you were staring at the sign and it said, and the sign was, "Are you prepared to be vulnerable today?" And so it was almost like this threat to the people who were in his room. So I'm like, no, that's not how you do it. How you do it is you demonstrate, some degree of vulnerability, right? So like if I'm meeting with the team, I met with the team yesterday and I'm like, the concerns I have is that we're going to have problem with sales and my performance is going to suffer, or my concern is that one of you is not going to feel heard by me or not feel supported by me, and therefore not going to feel like they can do a good job and not feel like they can tell me about that so I can remedy it, right? So you kind of like begin to bring in just a little bit of vulnerability yourself. But again, modulated for the environment. I don't say, like, I'm really concerned about, getting cancer. Like I don't, you know what I mean? Like I don't bring in, I guess I could, but I don't bring in necessarily things that aren't relevant to the specific topic at that time.
So Michael's worried he's missed a budget meeting. So that's what I get for coming late.
Michael, where's your spreadsheet?
Are you ready to get vulnerable, Michael?
So a very current situation in our family is we have an issue with a family member and our teen, and we've like elongated the conversation. We've set the stage by telling him, hey, we need to talk about this with a family member going on. We're going to do that Tuesday.
It's a health issue in the family, not a,
right.
But,
and he then has space to say, we gave him space in that moment. And he was like, I don't want to talk about it now. And we're like, great, we're going to talk about it next Tuesday. So he has it in his head and it's coming, but he's got 4 or 5 days to think about it.
And depending how serious the health issue is, it might not matter by Tuesday.
This is their real family issue, Kerry.
Listen, I'm all about
that.
The
Wasn't
gallows.
like a random example, you whack job.
I'm sorry, I'm from Boston. I can't.
Yes,
not.
I am here for the gallows. Love
wow. So let me just recover from that sentence. One thing I was thinking about in this process, though, is that sounds what you said, that as it aligns to, your intentions in the book are also how it aligns in parenting, right? Like a lot of times in parenting, we have these scenarios where a lot of times it goes wrong when we force something. A lot of times it goes wrong when we try to make it on our parent timeline versus on a human timeline. And there's a lot of times where we say, this is coming, so that you can prep for it and that sort of a thing. I'm hearing a lot of parenting sort of language. When you put this all together, did you find that there were the comparisons?
Yes.
For sure. Yeah. And I think it's parenting from a specific sort of angle, right? Because I think there's parenting, a lot of us, I think I had this in my own way as well. Like we thought parenting, our job was in some way to like shape a young mind or into the vision that we had for it, rather than to discover what's happening in that young mind as that person is developing themselves. And so one of the ways that I try to kind of, this method has taught me, or in the conversations we've had around it, both at work and personally, is to just sort of step back and have a position of curiosity about, hey, I'm just really curious about what's going on for you. I want more context, right? Because I think the kind of core, it's a story we tell in the book actually of our we live on a top floor of a brownstone in Brooklyn, and our downstairs, the second floor neighbor was smoking on his fire escape, and the smoke was coming into our bedroom. We thought it was happening from the first floor, and we hated the people on the first floor, but the guy on the second floor was a good friend. And, and we knew his kids, and our kids played together, all that kind of stuff. And so when we thought it was the people on the first floor, we were like, oh my God, we were sternly worded letter to the landlord or whatever, like we were going to be dicks about it. And then when we figured out it was the second floor neighbor, we were like, it's fine. Like it's just Brian, it's totally cool. And I think that's what I'm always trying to do, like, especially with people that annoy me or people that who I have some kind of like friction with. to try to I try to use the methodology at least somewhat consciously, sometimes without their knowledge. I'll just ask questions that's kind of based on it. Because one of the buckets is fears, hey, what are you concerned about? Like, what concerns you about this project? Please tell me. And if it's my behavior, please let me know. Like, I really want to know. And the more that I can invite that communication and be curious about that person's position, the more I get to learn, and the more I think problems or solutions begin to appear to things that once seemed intractable.
So you're building a team right now. I think a lot of other people have the situation where they inherit a team or, join a company and now they have a team. So how can they start something new like this with a group that's not all, starting up together new, but some have kind of entrenched ways of communicating or being, or a culture that might even be a little toxic or something?
Maybe, really?
Maybe.
What?
Heard such a thing.
Well, we do recommend that people start using it in a fairly low stakes way. Like, don't start using something new on a huge issue that has like extreme outcomes possible. Like, use it to start a meeting, or use it to start conversations with people that you have a really good rapport with already around a relatively easy topic. And then as you start practicing it, you can really start to integrate it on larger and larger stakes issues.
Yeah. Yeah, and I really recommend people use it. And again, you can use this in a stealth way, right? I can just kind of use it as a guide to conversations and to questions I might ask. So if I'm joining a company, I'm often curious, okay, intentions. Why does this company exist? What's the purpose behind this company? If I'm speaking with leadership, I'm kind of curious, what caused, what got them started in it? Like, what's their excitement? And then I'm also interested in what's top of mind right now. What are your pain points? What are the things keeping you up at night? What are your concerns? And then I'm interested in the boundary conditions. Like, what is it that, what do you need from me in order, what are the things that I must do and must not do in order to be a part of this culture and part of this organization? What are the things that you really need from people? And then finally, the dreams we find is it's a question almost nobody ever gets asked, but you're like, hey, if this goes really well, what's going to be true in a couple of years? Like, let's put ourselves in that mindset. And then that conversation, one of the things we often say is that one of the outcomes from this conversation can be the discovery that this is a bad idea, right? That whatever is about to happen is a really, really bad idea, right? And that I should probably not join your company. I should probably not be a part of your team. I'm speaking from a place, obviously, of privilege and choice, right? But and so, and then we also have the publisher who we mentioned earlier, who wrote the introduction to the book. She uses this to hire people and to onboard people. She uses the methodology sort of consciously in that way as well. And a lot of it is what do you need from me in order to do the best work? What boundaries can I, what are your boundaries? What do you have? What do you have a sick parent that you're taking care of? And does that constrain your time, the time available and your mental space available for work? And how do you like to be communicated with, and those kinds of things? We
discussed very briefly before the show, because we have this important rule that we don't talk about the show before the show, because we don't want anyone to miss the good stuff. But we did discuss where I'm getting. We're somewhat contemporary of age. And the reason I say that is to say that we are at a spot in our ages and or possibly careers in which our bullshitometer is set a little differently than it was when we were younger. We want different kinds of outcomes. We want different kinds of leaders. If we're going to be in a situation where we're not the boss, we need to know that we're working with good leaders, and we need the people that we have. If we're going to span out beyond just the two of you, for instance, you need better people to help guide and lead from that organization. Does this come from that a little bit as well, Alex or Bob?
I will say that there was just a report that came out from Chief, which is a women's leadership organization, that is showing this is the first time in American history, certainly maybe human history, that we have 5 generations of people working together at the same time. The age range is so vast. You get 5 generations of people, all with different baggage, all with different communication styles and different expectations, trying to figure out how to work together right now. So when you talk about contemporaries, I'm learning from people much younger than me and much older than me at the same time which I got to tell you, I don't know anything. Like I am such a, it just shows me I don't know anything because there's such different, not expectations, but experience, etc. So I find that fascinating. When I saw that new stat, I was like, oh my gosh, the world needs radical alignment now more than ever.
We had a question come in through the comments from Carol. This is going to probably cover your whole face, for which I apologize if it does.
Mike Wazowski.
Yeah. Oh, it's not too bad. For those of us with virtual teams, is your approach challenged by the fact that you never actually get to look each other in the eye, and how would you get around it?
Oh, that's such an interesting question. Yeah, like I was just listening. I'm listening to this great book on non-human intelligence right now, and for some reason, this just sort of came to mind. Is that eye contact is actually perceived as a threat by most species, and like I perceive it sometimes as a little. I've seen it. I've had it used on me as a threat. So I worry less about eye contact. I do think there's something about physical presence, like being in the same room with people, which is really important. But one thing we discovered during the pandemic when we had to move, like I'm a consultant and I used to be in the air all the time, like and going to meet in person. And then during the pandemic, everything became remote. And one of the things I found was I used to do this methodology using like either Post-it notes or people just like speaking it into the room. But because we were now online, I began using a digital platform that allowed me to just like ask the question and then have people answer it. And we could even set it so it was a platform that we could set it so everybody was anonymous when they were doing it. And so that kind of psychological safety, right? So we were working with teams that suddenly that maybe were under a lot of strife. And it was just sort of like, hey, why are you here? Like what's the, intentions? What are your intentions about being part of this team, part of this organization, part of this company? What are you concerned about given where we are right now, given the coming quarter or whatever that, we would scope it, that question to the conversation. What do you need to be your best and what do you not? And what we found is that as people were populating this board anonymously, that everybody felt like really seen and heard, because it turns out like everybody's kind of like many people have the same thing going on inside their head, but there's no venue for them to actually share that. And so when they would see like their concern written by somebody else whose name they didn't know, right? And then see that. And it also gave leaders an opportunity to see like, oh, 20 people have this concern. We better pay attention to that, right? So
Carol wants to know the polling platform.
Oh, it was called Easy Retro, which is just it's a very, very simple platform. It's what I like about Easy Retro is you don't have to have an account to join. It's just like, this is an ad. They don't pay me anything. Pay them, in fact. But
never mind them.
Yeah, but there is it. You don't have to be technical. It's not like one of these, more robust platforms that has all this functionality where you have to like orient yourself to it. It's just like you go on. There's one thing you can do, and so Easy Retro is a great platform.
So I make it a rule not to dog ear my books, but I did dog ear yours, where you talk about how psychological safety is the key to successful teams, like based on observation, and I wonder how that relates to, this is going to sound weird, but notes, right? You're talking about sticky notes and anonymous polls and stuff. Some people find it threatening when you take notes during meetings if the conversation is especially fraught. So yes notes, no notes, shared notes. Like what do you do with a radical alignment conversation that you want to document, but you don't want to turn off that kind of psychological safety that people need?
I think that's a great boundary to know about yourself, right? And if you need that in a conversation to share that with the people, like, hey, it's really, and I am using this word correctly, it's really triggering for me to have other people take notes about what I'm saying if we could not do that. And I know that there are different learning styles. And I'm the kind of person that needs to read and write, and like I need all of the venues into my brain to process something. So writing notes for me is actually really, really valuable in a highly technical setting or something with a lot of numbers that I need to refer back to. So, maybe it's not something that you decide in the moment, but it's something to know about yourself so that you can acknowledge the different styles that are in the room.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's important. I think it's important to be sensitive to that. Like I use one of these AI note takers now for every virtual meeting I'm in. But if I'm doing this and I feel like it's going to be especially contentious or it's especially new group that I don't know very well, then I might like hey, let's leave that out of it, right? Because people can feel surveilled. And that's part of the setting the stage stuff, Chris, right? Like, let's make sure that we're at least doing our best to explain why we're doing what we're doing, and ask if anybody has any questions or objections to the way we're doing things before we get in. I'm a big believer in giving people a ton of agency, and continually, especially if I'm in a power position, to be like, please give me feedback. Please let me know if you want to talk to me privately. I'll be available privately. If you need to back channel to me, kind of give people multiple options about ways they can communicate.
I love this question because it's very timely. We are now at my organization trialing Otter, which may or may not be your note-taking friend.
Fireflies is mine, but it's the same thing. Yeah.
Oh, yeah. Same kind of guy. So that's even funnier because the way we call our employees Fireflies. So I guess we should have gone with that. But so what I've come to this as chief of staff, I'm chief of staff to the CEO. So I'm his hamburger helper. I go where he can't be all the time. And when I'll do my one-on-ones with people, if Otter shows up, because it has a way of doing, it sort of has this weird feeling, this like weird problem of, it's like I'm a priest getting your confession, but I also have a stenographer. So I have to kick Otter out every single time because no one wants to talk when there's a robot recording everything you just said. So I love the question. When Kerry posed it, I was sort of thinking, what? And then I was like, no, you're right. That's a very intense, like if you say something like, I have a hard time following orders, and I go, that is a moment, that is a trigger in that moment in a huge way. So it's very interesting to bring it back into this conversation, though. It does fit in all of the framework stuff you've set up, because you want to set boundaries. You want to make sure that there's some game rules that people can feel comfortable saying, oh, a little weird by note taking. Can we just agree to hands off our devices for a second? Or, like, as long as you can bring it up, that it fits your frame. The question I have is, I think like all humans, we have multiple personalities. And one of my personalities is I absolutely want to do everything you're saying. Then there's other times when I just want to hold your throat closely and tightly until you're questioning your future. And in that second one, I don't want to take the time to have a conversation. Do you have a shorthand version, or do you have a short of like, oh God, the building's on fire? Like, is there the easy Monopoly rules versus the real Monopoly rules? What's the story?
Well, like if it's urgent, is that what you're saying?
Why don't you go? Because I think we're going to say the same thing.
Well, I mean, I think I've said like we can use the methodology in a stealth way or in a formal way. And I think the higher the stakes are, the more formal I actually want to be about it in some ways, right? Like if I'm feeling particularly angry or triggered or something like that, one, that's my problem, hopefully not the other person's problem, or I don't want to make it the other person's problem. And two, I want to be like, again, maybe going first with how I'm feeling, like, hey, I'm feeling particularly amped up about this and particularly urgent, but I really want to get where you're coming from. So and that's my intent, right? So kind of like leading with, and actually we do this, like you might be surprised. We are a married couple and we have had fights. We have had disagreements, some of them about writing a book together. And, and so I find it very helpful to, like, when I go into that conversation amped up, to be like, the reason I'm in this conversation is because I want to get through to the other side of it. And I want to get back to the place where we're collaborating, where we're working well together. But right now I'm having a hard time doing that. Would you be open to having that conversation with me? Right. So,
and the most frequent use for intentions, concerns, boundaries, and dreams for me is I use it by myself to get clear before I have a conversation with someone.
You talk to yourself.
I talk to myself. But I write it out. This is what we're going to talk about, and these are my things about this, so that I feel clear and present, and my nervous system can calm down before I go into it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
you can see the tension ratcheting up. Yeah, tension ratcheting up for people sometimes. So I think that's important.
Yeah, I mean, that's a
For
good point.
sure.
Like even if I'm doing the conversation, even if I'm leading it with a group or having it with a group, I will just do it for myself around the topic before I even bring it to the, like I'll do the homework first, so I'll know where I'm going once I'm there, especially if I'm facilitating or if I'm an active participant in it. But yeah, and then sometimes you're like, oh yeah, I don't have to have that conversation. I did it with myself a few years ago about social media because I kept finding myself, I don't know if anybody else experiences this, but you can get a little amped up on social media sometime, and you end up parts of your personality come out that you're like, hey, I don't necessarily feel great about that part of my personality. And I quit Twitter the next day. So that
was probably for the best.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Before you
I'm with you on that. I forgot something at the beginning of the show, so I'm going to just throw it in here where it makes absolutely no sense. Douche, we're sponsored. Who knew? You can make your own show and do it better than we do.
Can't believe they still sponsor us.
StreamYard. They're a nice sponsor. You can make a show just like this.
We wait till the very end and we're like, oh, yeah.
Maybe even at the beginning of the show. That'd be crazy. Woo! We have come to this part of the show where we do this.
Oh, and here's our person of the day. Kaboom!
Well, let's see.
It's gonna be
Michael Doherty made me laugh, and I like that he showed up late. So
you hate when people are late.
Yes, I do.
You've written LinkedIn posts about how you hate that people are late.
Yes. I guess I should be a little more radically aligned with you, Michael. Don't do it again, please. That wasn't really good. Anyway, that entitles you to a free apple, something. I forgot what we always say.
We say it gets you a free apple. You just have to buy it, wash it, and then bake it into a tartlet.
That's the one, tartlet. Okay, so now we've come to the part of the show that we've asked everybody. Sir Mix-a-Lot. We've asked Butterscotch, one of the world's best female beatboxers. We have asked 2 different dominatrixes and many more people.
Sister Anne Flanagan or the Daughters of St. Paul.
Anne Flanagan. What goes in your backpack? This could be something physical. It could be something metaphorical. It could be hope for the future. It could be a clown nose. Kerry, what's something physical you could throw to a backpack?
Extra set of teeth. DJ Cumberbund on YouTube recommends extra set of teeth.
He's a New Yorker. I don't think he's a Brooklyn boy, but he's a New Yorker at least. And then how about something metaphorical?
Ooh, kindness. Ariel Helvetica, burlesque performer, put kindness in the backpack.
Kindness. Michael, I'll be taking it out of your pay, just so you know. Okay. Bob, Alex, tell me a little something or other. Oh, I didn't mean to push that button. Tell me a little something else. What should we put in our backpack?
I was raised by a high school principal who still to this day carries all the time Ziploc bags, AA batteries, and Sharpie markers. And he's right. You should always have those 3 things.
Ziploc bags, AA batteries, and Sharpie markers. I can't argue with that.
3 of the 3 within 1 foot of me. So I am with you.
Let's not talk about what else is on that desk. Nobody's ready for that.
Don't want to talk about it.
Bob, what goes in your backpack?
It's recency bias because it's sitting right here, but I really love these Muji pens. They're like they're like the thing.
Muji pens are great.
Yeah.
Muji pens probably made those poor.
Yeah.
Very tight.
Kudos for not saying a copy of Radical Alignment available at your local bookstore.
Which, by the way, for reasons I don't entirely understand, is $3.49 right now for the hardcover. So you might as well avail of that on Amazon.
Go get it. It's actually quite lightweight. You can totally
can read it to you. We did the audiobook.
Yeah.
Hear us.
Even better.
I love
I do have one other question before I bring up the other thing I want to bring up, which is the book you were talking about, Non-Human Intelligence. Is that the one, Encounters by Pasulka?
No, it's I'm going to pull up my Audible and then I will have
the other one, God something, God, human, monkey, something.
God, human, monkey.
My Audible.
I didn't mean to grind the show to a halt.
No, wait. Ways of Being, is that the name of it? Yeah, Ways of Being, Animals, Plants, Machines, and the Search for a Planetary Intelligence by James Brittle. Bridle.
Well, I have 2 credits burning a hole in my pocket, so anyone I can look up. That sounds like a goodie. I was just re-listening to Pattern Recognition for about the 107th time by Gibson in between doing something else. So, and as you know, she took a duck in the face.
But how many knots? At how many